to begin back on our practice on annual goals, I would remind you of the norms, the meeting norms. Please try to do the best you can to keep your mic muted unless you're speaking. And we certainly want you to speak if you want to and if you need to. And but otherwise, try to keep that thing muted so that we don't have that background noise. Sometimes that background noise is real ear piercing and cuts right to the bone a little bit. So just be careful with that. And we appreciate you for being here, and we appreciate your time. And hopefully we're giving you some things that you can work on and giving you some resources. And like I said, through the Google Classroom, we're going to try to keep this interactive SharePoint open. We're going to try to give you the updated information that you need to do your jobs. And we're going to try to share all that we have. We're asking everyone to sign in through the chat this afternoon. Simply put your name in the chat as you rejoin us. And we'll save that, and that'll be our accounting for you being here for the afternoon session. And we're certainly excited that you're here. We've got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to try to go for about 45 to 50 minutes over the next 3 hours and take a little break. Our breaks may be a little shorter because we got a lot of information to cover, and we want to get everything in that we need to get in regards to this. But right now, we're going to turn our attention to the screen, and we're going to put you in, we want to put you in breakout rooms, and we want you to consider this goal. And we want you to come back with the answer. Does it have all the components? And is this goal truly measurable? And before you answer very quickly, just because it has all 6 components does not make it measurable. So what we want you to do is we want you to practice with that. We're going to place you in breakout rooms, and we'll try to hit some of those breakout rooms. Our staff members will try to hit those breakout rooms to see if you have any questions. And we will certainly this will give us another opportunity to consider the components of the goal. We understand that 6 components are required. We understand that we're to embed the particular tool, not just say direct or indirect or curriculum-based measures or authentic. We want to embed that tool within the goal to say that that tool is what's going to measure that goal or measure that verb, and that in fact that method of measurement will measure that verb. So we want you to think about that. We want you to look at that really deeply, and we want you to look at that. I'm going to go back to my screen here for a second. Why don't you take just a second and jot down the goal? I'm going to share my screen. Take a second, jot down the goal. And then if you want to, jot down the question. Does the goal have all the components, and is this goal truly measurable? Please share your answers. You're welcome to unmute when you come back. But what we'll probably do is just have the leader of each section, the leader of each group, because the group is so big. We'll just have, like, I think there'll probably be about 18 or so breakout rooms. So out of those 18 breakout rooms, we should have one leader identified, and that leader will be the person that will put the answer in the chat. So let's just consider this. Given a reading passage with his independent reading level, within his independent reading level, Mickey will fluently read the passage at 125 words per minute over 4 consecutive trials measured by biweekly data tracking and teacher observations. Now, we want you to look at this, and we want you to improve this if you can. It certainly can improve. I'll say that. Does it have all the components? Is it measurable? And what would you do to rewrite that goal? That would be the last part of this that I don't have up there on the screen. So let's just really think about that. Why don't you use your reaction button down at the bottom and give me a thumbs up if you have the information off this screen that you need to go to your breakout room. Really quickly, just put me a thumbs up or a hand clap. Hold your applause to a minimum, please. Just kidding. Go ahead and put that up as a reaction. I see one thumbs up. I see more thumbs up. Just get that information, write that goal down. Give me a thumbs up if you have it. See, Brenda gave her thumbs up. Thank you, Brenda. Angela Holbrook, thumbs up. Good job. Whitney Francis. We're seeing thumbs up come up, so I assume that we're getting that information. All right, so now I'm gonna put you in breakout rooms, and I'll be checking on you. Look at this particular goal, given a reading passage within his independent reading level. Mickey will fluently read the passage at 125 words per minute over 4 consecutive trials as measured by biweekly data tracking and teacher observations. And so the question first is, does it have all the components? And I think the answer is, and I'm going to go to the answer page. I think the answer is that it does have all the components. I think you can see that given a reading passage with his independent reading level is circumstance, and Mickey is certainly the A part, and will fluently read the passage is certainly the B part, the behavior, and at 125 words per minute over 4 consecutive trials is certainly the criterion degree, and as measured by biweekly data tracking and behavior observation. You could argue that biweekly would go in the frequency, but we've cautioned you guys in the past about using biweekly, and we are certainly going to say that we don't want you to use the word biweekly or bi-monthly because it's confusing. It could be misconstrued by a parent reading that, or by another person if you're making it, pass the stranger test. It could mean both 2 times a week or twice a week, or every 2 weeks, or you see. So that's a little bit vague, and we want to stay away from that. But that is a frequency, and then the data tracking and teacher observations hits the E part, the evaluation method of measurement. But there's some things that we need to ask ourselves. Is it truly measurable? And some of you pointed me to the fact that given a reading passage within his independent reading level, we might say his name here, and we also might say what his independent reading level is, and make mention of that so that the circumstance is a little more specific and a little more clear. And we can gauge fluently reading the passage at 125 words per minute, but can we do it with data tracking and teacher observations? That might just be some poor wording. So what we were thinking about was, maybe you're doing this with a running record if you're doing a reading passage. Maybe you're doing this with a curriculum-based measure, which is a probe. So we would want you to end up with something that looked like this. And this could be a running record, but it also could be an oral reading fluency probe. And that certainly probably would be the most correct. Given a 3rd grade reading passage, Mickey will fluently read the passage at 125 words per minute over 4 consecutive trials as measured by weekly oral reading fluency probe. So any questions about that, you can put them in the chat. And like I said before, just some housekeeping kinds of things. If you have not signed in to the chat in the second half of the day when you return from lunch, please do so. So we'll have an accounting for who's here. And then also at the end, we're going to have my email address is going to be up there, and we're going to give time for questions, hopefully, if we don't run out of time. So we're running on the 50-10 rule. We're right now at 1:30, and so we're going to keep forging ahead and try to pick up some new information here as we move through. But we want you to understand, when we write a goal, you have to have all 6 components, and you have to have the method of measurement that's going to measure the verb. So the weekly oral reading fluency probe or the running record will measure reading the passage at 125 words per minute. So, and if you backward chain and you were looking at the present level, maybe his present level would say, given a 3rd grade reading passage, Mickey will fluently read the passage at 90 words per minute. And you would have that information, and you would be able to say, a fair goal right here with his rate of progress, with his disability category, and everything considered. Then we would look and say, yeah, we think he can do 125 words by the end of the year. So we're trying to figure out what's going to be reasonable for him in 1 year when we write a goal. Any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to unmute and say what you have to say on your mind. If not, we're going to go on. And in the chat, let me just check that real quick. We start to see people are still signing in. So what I tried to do, and if you'll just bear with me, we have 20 or so breakout rooms when we go to the chats. And I'm trying to get to 10 or so of those each time we go to a breakout room. So I'm trying to come in and speak to you. I don't want you to feel like you're by yourself here today. I don't want you to feel disengaged, and we're doing our very best with the number of people that we have to try to get around and speak to a lot of you. If not, you can always email me if you have questions for clarification. And I'll defer everything to Brenda, so, because she's the guru. All right, so we're going to move on. And we're just going to do these on the screen. Given a classroom situation, Pluto will appropriately display, when we were in the task group, we were real bored, so we used Disney names. Pluto will display appropriate interactions with staff with 85% accuracy for 6 consecutive weeks as measured by daily behavior data and teacher observation. Again, all components there. Can you tweak it? Is it measurable? Those are the questions you need to ask yourself when you review your own. If you go back, you should have in your mind right now, if you're a veteran special education teacher, you should have your IEPs in mind. And you should be able to say what's wrong with these and really break them down. So if I'm looking at this, someone just put it in the chat real quick. What's wrong with this given a classroom situation? Is there anything wrong with that circumstance? We know that's a circumstance, right? And for you people that are first year folks, we've been doing this for a lot of years, a lot of us. And so it's easy for us to pick those out, but you'll get better at this. And the more you practice, the better you'll get. So it's really vague, isn't it? It's really broad. It's really too broad. So given a classroom situation, we need to kind of nail down what that situation in the classroom is. Is it going to be in a small group? Is it going to be during circle time? What is he doing there? Because remember, the circumstance is setting up the conditions under which we're going to measure the verb. And so we got to be able to narrow that situation down so that we know when to take data. And Pluto will display appropriate interactions with staff with 85% accuracy for 4 consecutive weeks as measured by daily behavior data and teacher observations. So I'm going to go on to the answer sheet here. We're going to say, given redirection by staff, Pluto will respond using eye contact, clean language, and respectful tone with a score of 9 on a 12-point rubric over 5 consecutive trials as measured weekly by the rubric. So the rubric is going to be the method of measurement. You're going to have that rubric. It's going to be a 12-point rubric, and he's going to get a 9 on that rubric by doing these things, responding using eye contact, clean language, respectful tone, given redirection by staff. Now, does anyone have anything to say about the way we corrected this? Is there something that we could maybe tweak a little bit still? Because this was the answer that the task group came up with 3 or 4 years ago when I was on IEP task group with the state co-ops. And we have 9 of those in the state, if you don't know. And there's due process consultants all over the state that come together on this IEP task group. And we sit there sometimes and we make mistakes because IEPs are hard to write and they're hard to get perfect. I don't know of anyone that has a perfect one, ever. Put it in the chat. Put it in the chat if you see anything up here that might make this a little hard to measure and a little hard to take data on. And could we use a checklist instead of a rubric? Possibly. And could we use a frequency count? Think about that for a second and put in the chat, I like checklists. I like checklists too myself. That's why I mentioned it. Also, if you remember back to the early part of our training today, one of the things that I said that we shouldn't be doing with IEP annual goals is we shouldn't be putting multiple skills into one goal. So we might be stretching ourselves here a little bit. If we're saying appropriate behavior, that's a little vague. We want to know exactly what skill it is he's using. Responding using eye contact, clean language, and respectful tone, that's 2 or 3 things he's doing there. So we may want to stay away from that and break that down even further into exactly what type of information we're wanting to gain there and what behavior we're wanting to change. You know, using eye contact, clean language, respectful tone, are we going to be able to capture that? So that's what I wanted you to think about right there as we move through. What type of redirection? Good, very good. Now we're thinking in the right direction. Is it oral redirection? Is it hand over hand? Is it manual redirection? Do we have to prompt the student in a certain way? Do we have to cue them in a certain way? So it needs to be measurable, and he's responding using eye contact. Can we measure that? Can we measure clean language? Can we measure respectful tone? I think we can, but what do we use to measure it with? Are we looking at the number of times he does it? Are we looking at how many times he does it based on a 9 to 12 point rubric, and he's getting all 3 of those things correct, and that's going to be a 9 on a 12? So it's a lot to think about in terms of the way and just because it's up there in black and blue and green doesn't make it right. So we want you to think about it. We want you to think about, can we measure it, and do we have the right tool to measure it with? If I would say, when I come to your districts and I review your files, I would say this is one of the #1 things that I see is that we're getting measurement tools. We're either leaving them out or we're not considering whether or not that tool is going to measure that verb and whether or not that circumstance is going to allow us the conditions under which we can measure that verb. Once we start thinking about it in that term, and once we start to understand the measurement tools by looking at websites like the South Bend website that we've got accessed in your Google Classroom, then we're going to be able to understand the process better. And this is also going to help us process the information that we need to process and take the data that we need to take so that we can do progress monitoring. We can say, progress monitoring, it's going to inform our instructions. It's going to tell us whether or not the kid's making progress. Are we teaching the correct things? Those types of things. So we really, really need to think about getting it right. So present level, we know what's in present level. We know those 5 components. We know what they look like. We've talked about that. We've talked about some specific answers to adverse effect and how we look at similar grade performance and how we say how different this child is based on their disability. And then we look at the components, and it's not enough just to get the components in there. We have to put the right components, and we have to put measurable components in those boxes. So it's certainly a lot to think about and a lot to do. So we've been talking a lot about methods of measurement. 2 questions exist here that must be answered. What is the verb to be measured in the annual goal? And what tool will measure the verb? Right on cue, I'm going to show you a list of measurable verbs and how they fit along Bloom's taxonomy right here. Go to my screen, change it up here just a little bit, and hopefully this will come up. This is the types of verbs that we know are measurable. They're not vague verbs, okay? And you can see as we move up the continuum and the information and the activities and the learning becomes increasingly more intense and complex, we see the words that we use. So those types of words, we need to make sure that we are using words that are measurable. And then if you go down to the bottom of this sheet, they'll put them in there for you like that. Remember previously learned information, knowledge. So you're going to arrange, you're going to define, you're going to describe, you're going to list. And then when you get over there to analysis, you're going to appraise, you're going to break down, you're going to calculate. You do an application, you're going to choose, you're going to manipulate, modify, you're going to use, you're going to solve, lots of math kinds of things right here. When we're doing comprehension kind of things, we're going to predict, we're going to review, we're going to describe, we're going to defend. Notice that read is not on there. These are ways to comprehend from reading. So I want you to think about your levels, and I want you to think about Bloom's taxonomy as we're looking at those increasingly more difficult pursuits academically, and making sure that we're writing goals that are going to challenge students, and we're going to move them from where they are a little closer to what's expected. Okay? Now, let me go back here just a second, and I've got another little thing I want to show you. And this is the South Bend Community School Corporation website. Now, you can Google this and pull it up, South Bend Community School Corporation, and you can put in assessments, and it will bring this up. But this does a really good job. It's some really good back reading on understanding the methods of measurement. And if you look down there, this is really directed toward measuring behavior. But you get the idea on direct measures, and even so on permanent products where you might be doing that indirectly. Does the behavior generate a product? For example, a written assignment, a clean desktop, a completed checklist. You might use permanent product. Can you easily count every time that the behavior occurs? If that is the case, you would do an event recording or a frequency count. Does the behavior occur so frequently that it may be difficult to count the accuracy or count it accurately? You would use a momentary time sample. You just take a time sample, so many minutes, and it's going to happen, or you take an interval recording. And all of these are linked to explanations, and I'm going to go on and show you what I'm talking about under permanent product right here. Or let's do frequency sheet. We're going to count how many times a behavior occurs. We're going to capture that data. If you'll just click on that, it will bring up, it'll bring up a sheet that's view only, that you can copy and paste, put into a Word document, and you can use that to do your event recording. That's simply you're counting how frequently the behavior is occurring. So that's the type of information that's the type of methods of measurement you need to understand. And that is certainly at your fingertips right now. Those two, this methods of measurement, and then we're going to talk about it later. The South Bend website is a really nice website. But we want you to get to thinking about, do I have the correct verb? Is it ambitious enough to challenge my student? And then can I measure it because I have a clear understanding of the tool? And I'm including that tool in those goals. So methods of measurement, how the implementer measures student progress toward each measurable annual goal. Now in Infinite Campus, it says the method chosen should be practical and yield data that can be easily analyzed. So we want to pick tools that we know are going to work under these particular selections. We need to understand what is a direct measure and what's the list of the direct measure. We need to understand that list, the list is in the Google Classroom. That Bloom's taxonomy list is in Google Classroom. And then we're going to get, so right here, here's you a screenshot. So this is a drop-down box. You're going to choose one of these and it's going to put it in here, but we want you to embed, like this one is choosing direct measures, and they're choosing a frequency count. They're going to say how many times the student can correctly produce the S and Z phoneme in all positions. How many times can they do it? So we're doing a frequency count, and we're going to direct measure. What makes that a direct measure is that we're sitting right there with the child. So you need to understand the definition of direct measure, indirect measure, curriculum-based measure, and authentic assessment. Understanding that authentic assessment cannot stand alone because lots of times that's anecdotal information, and we need to put numbers with that to be able to measure it. Here's curriculum-based measures. Curriculum-based measures are probes. If you're doing things that come right out of the curriculum, if you're doing oral reading fluency, if you're doing math fluency, if you're doing written fluency, whatever it might be, probes are the way to go to measure the growth of student proficiency. It's a brief time sample made up of academic skills taken from the general curriculum, standardized to provide valid and reliable indications of student progress. Keep in mind, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in progress monitoring, that when we are doing progress monitoring, the more frequently that we can take data like this on these curriculum-based measures, the stronger our trend data is going to be. So we want to think about curriculum-based measures in that they're probes. They just take a few minutes to do, but we're doing them a lot so that we have strong data to suggest that the child's making progress. And they're standardized. You got to do it the same way. You got to use the same tool every time. The same way. So examples of CBM: oral reading fluency probe, math computation probe, math concepts and application, and you could even add written fluency to that as well. Now, under direct measures, a direct observation of performance and repeated recordings of student response. The student must be present. And I'm going to try to finish going on the 50-10 rule. We got about 4 minutes left. I'm going to try to finish up here on indirect and authentic and give you just an accounting of what those things are, and then we'll come back and talk about it some more. A direct observation of performance and repeated recordings of student response. The student must be present for a direct measurement to occur. Examples of direct measurement: frequency count event recording, time sampling interval recording, duration recording, latency recording, scatter plot, ABC recording. Anecdotal recording must be paired with another method of measurement because you got to have numbers. A checklist or a running record may be also a direct measure where you're sitting with the student and you're marking how many errors they're making in a reading passage. So these are things that you're going to do with the student in front of you. So that's not an exhaustive list, but can you see? Now I'm going to take you back in time for just a second. When progress monitoring came to the forefront, it's probably been about 15 or 18 years ago. Cheryl can shake her head. I can see her. Cheryl knows about this stuff because she understands these terms very well because she deals with low incidence and she deals with behavior. She did a really nice job of explaining these, but you have to understand this tool here. And you have to understand what frequency count means, what duration recording means. So I gave you that South Bend website to go back and do the back reading on that. To be a strong progress monitor, you have to understand the tool. Okay? Cheryl, did you have something to interject there? You're still muted, Cheryl. Cheryl's not able to speak to us. I don't know if what's happened to her.
Hey, I'm sorry, Denny, I'm back.
Okay, I see you. And I know you've got your plate full, but this is slide 84, and we talked about this the other day. You do a really good job, and you did a really good job of explaining this to some folks in a CAP training one time. And so I just was wondering if you had something to weigh in here in terms of how important it is to understand these different types of recording methods of measurement.
Oh, yeah. Well, it really depends on what behavior you're measuring in order to determine which one you're going to use. So like the first one I see, and I apologize, I've been outside. I had to go out there and take care of something. But in terms of the frequency count, so if you're counting how many, okay, so maybe you're looking at counting how many times a kid gets up from their chair, or how many times a kid taps their pencil, something like that. That's very discrete, something that you can count without a whole lot of issue. So, and I mentioned getting out of the seat. So if the student's going to get out of the seat and stay up for, 3 hours, that's probably not a good thing to use a frequency count for, okay? So you're looking at a discrete behavior that's here, and then it's gone, okay? So something you can easily count. So for example, if I was counting frequency of a student getting out of the seat, but one time they did it for 3 hours and then another time they did it for 4 hours, and I said, well, they got up twice from their chair, that's not necessarily a good picture of what happened. So make sure it's a discrete beginning and an end. Another thing you might want to count is curse words, or something like that. Words per minute, that's a good one. That's getting into a little bit of a different count, but still that's a frequency count.
And Cheryl, can I interject here too? This
sure.
duration recording, to me, we have a lot of students on caseloads that are under the other health impairment for ADHD, off-task behavior, those types of things. This one you would need to really learn to use for those students if you're trying to increase their time on task. And that's how you measure that. How long does the time on task last?
Yeah,
right?
definitely so. And in terms of duration, I look at it, and Denny Paul mentioned a good point, time on task. So there's kind of two ways you could measure that. Kind of what I would call a positive way is time on task versus maybe a more negative connotation with time off task. So in this particular case, time on task is what I would look at measuring, because that's really what you're trying to increase. That's what you're looking at, and it puts a positive spin as opposed to, well, he was off task 4 hours today. So the duration. So with that, one of the things that you could definitely use a tool, with being your phone, but if you're going to let different people take that duration recording, or any of the data for that matter, you need to make sure that everybody's on board with what that looks like. So in duration recording, you need a clear beginning and a clear end. Latency recording, that's how long does it take them to get going, okay, from the directive. So if I say, Denny Paul, get your pencil out, that's a directive to Denny Paul. So if it takes him 5 minutes to get his pencil out and to comply, that's latency recording. Scatter plot recording, I love this one because it tells you when these behaviors are going on, okay? So when is little Johnny out of his seat? Well, you may take a scatter plot, and a scatter plot is basically your day chunked into intervals. So you may take an hour of the day and chunk that into 4 intervals. And if Johnny is out of his seat during any period of that 15-minute time period, you highlight that in, and so that you know how many intervals during that day, or not really how many intervals, you're kind of getting into something else, but you're really looking at when in the world is this behavior occurring. ABC, antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. With that one, make sure that you stay definitely objective and look at really what's happening. So my favorite part about this is sometimes the consequence that we give students, it's not really negative in their mind. So one consequence that sometimes happens is maybe a kid gets sent to the office. Well, I don't know about y'all, but the happiest place in a school building is at that office. That's where the moving and shaking happens. So as a teacher, I might think that's a punishment, but to the kid, oh honey, Disney World is in the office. So make sure that you think about those consequences and really write down and think about the true consequence that happened, and really how the student views that. Of course, anecdotal recording is just what I see most commonly that aides take. They just really write what happened, and that kind of opinion, subjective piece. A checklist, I see that sometimes, and then the running records. Those are definitely the running records specifically for literacy. Does that answer your question, Denny Paul?
Absolutely, and a marvelous job as always. We appreciate it very much, the help that you gave vetting this piece of work, and all the technology support that you've given us. So we really appreciate Cheryl being on today, and she does a really good job. So if you have questions about these things, I would point you to that South Bend website where you can do some back grading, or I would point you to either myself or Cheryl. You can send us an email. And so certainly our doors are open, our eyes and ears are open, and we'll try to get you an answer around these things. But so key to getting progress monitoring correct is understanding first the method of measurement. Okay, and we're going to move on now. Cheryl, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And Denny, Paul, anytime your people need me, we're here definitely to serve you all. And if you need us, just let us know. Thank you, guys.
So much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so indirect measures. And I can tell you these nice little pictures that are on the screen with my elementary slides are courtesy of Cheryl Mathis. She was able to put some of that stuff, her and Chastity Craft were able to help me on Friday to try to pretty this thing up a little bit because I'm learning. And so anyway, on indirect measures, using scoring criteria to review student performance without observing the student during the performance. So the kid might be down the hallway and somebody else is taking the measurement, so it's an indirect measure. They may be taking a test, they may be doing some type of homework, and here are some of those types of, so using scoring criteria to review student performance without observing the student during the performance. Checklist reappears here, as you can see. And then authentic assessment measures a student's performance in tasks and situations that resemble real life tasks and situations. There must be, these must be paired with another method of measurement because there's not many numbers in anecdotal information. So we need numbers, and we'll have to pair another, either an indirect, a curriculum base, or a direct measure with this. So lots of times you don't see that selected because it's a lot of progress monitoring, but sometimes it's very effective in getting students. And during this virtual time, providing these students with the opportunity to do projects, project-based learning, portfolios, and looking at work samples through a different lens, through authentic assessment, giving them some real life, real world tasks to do, might be more appropriate than doing a curriculum-based measure. So keep that in mind and explore this possibility as well as we move through. So it's 1:57. We went about 7 minutes over on our 50-10 rule. So let's take about let's say a 10-minute break here. We'll come back at 2:07 and we'll pick back up with progress monitoring. Okay, we're back for the last segment. If you can hear me and are getting transmission, give us a thumbs up. Use your reaction button down at the bottom of the screen. Give us a thumbs up in your screen so we can see that. Start seeing some of those come up. I know you probably get tired of doing that, but it's my way of interacting with you a little bit and trying to manage such a big group. What we've tried to do around this training is we've tried to hit areas that we really felt like we needed improvement on in the region. And with that being said, we're going to move right on. We're going to talk about another big topic, and that's specially designed instructions. You know, we really understand, or hopefully you understand, that in order to be eligible in the state of Kentucky, you not only have to meet the eligibility criteria that's listed on the eligibility form that you fill out, but you also have to need specially designed instruction. And this is one of those things that, you know, we do to instruct, to assess, to reteach, to adapt to the unique needs of the student, and to ensure access. We have a twofold charge to kind of clarify this screen right here. It's what the teacher does. Special design instruction is what the teacher does that's intently different. And it has to be delivered by a special education teacher the first time. So, you know, when you're doing special design instruction, that's the service minutes that we just talked about. That's how much we're getting special education and how much we're instructing, assessing, reteaching, adapting for the unique needs of the student. And then also the supplementary aids and services that come to ensure access to the general curriculum. So there's a tie to that. And on special design instruction, we realize that it's what our special ed teachers do different to really provide a unique situation to all of our students. Okay, I just got it. Sorry about that. I got a text. So special design instruction is provided by the certified special education teacher or the early IECE certified preschool teacher or the SLP if you're a speech only student. So it's necessary, and it has a degree of intensity that's not required, or a degree of intensity that you may not see in terms of the number of reps that you're getting, in terms of the planning, the design, the delivery that you would get in the core instruction. Hopefully that core instruction has been designed to hit all of our students, and they've used a universal design for learning there. However, this is what is provided by special education teachers, whether it be in co-teaching, resource rooms, or whatever, that is planned, designed, and delivered with a degree of intensity, and it's required. It's what the student needs. It's what the teacher does. That is different from the regular core instruction that that you would get in a regular education classroom with no co-teaching or no resource room. So here is some real good directions. We're going to put you in breakout rooms for a minute, and here's the discussion that we want you to have. Okay, we want you to choose a leader like you always do. We want you to discuss the SDI definition and discuss with partner. We know what the SDI definition, that's what the teacher does. It's the strategies, it's the planning, it's the adaptation, it's the assessing, it's all those things that we do. And I want you to discuss the following scenario. A parent comes to you and asks you, what will you do different to support my child in regards to specially designed instruction? So I want you to develop 6 things that you can do, 6 different activities, 6 different things around. What are your top 6? If you had to come up with a top 6 for kids that we know we're going to have reading difficulties. We know we're going to have kids that are off task. We know we're going to have kids that can't do math. We know we're going to have kids that have behavior issues. What are your top 6 SDI activities, strategies that you could come up with that you could answer that parent, this is what I'm going to do for your child? I've got some preloaded answers. We've been through this discussion before in some other venues, but we want to revisit this here because this is what special designed instruction is. And after we do that, we'll return to the main room and be prepared to share. Okay. So let me stop the share for a second. Let me do the breakout rooms. And we're going to open all breakout rooms. And I'll try to visit you. Okay, we should be coming back in. And if we're coming back into the main room, I would just ask that you put it in the share in the chat. 1 or 2 of your strategies. So we'll have a SharePoint. We'll be able to save this and we'll be able to get some ideas. I want to try to show you something here again. If I can possibly get to it. On our interactive sheet that I tried so hard to make sure it was right and could get it to you. You can see all the things that we've gone through today. And we're going to try to end this discussion up here just in a little bit and talk a little bit about transition toward the end. But I wanted you to think about these guiding questions that you see on the screen. What will you do to improve the performance of students with disabilities? And John O'Connor wrote a great book, Great Achievement for Special Needs Students. And it really centers around developing, a big part of that book centers around developing your list. Your list may differ from my list. My list, I may want to, really, really focus on certain things. But I wanted to put together for you my list. And I wanted you to see what that looked like. And I wanted you to realize that some of what I have on my list is rooted in research. And it's supposed to be things that work with special needs students. And it's supposed to be rooted in some real strong evidence-based practice as we move through to really make an impact. I think everything goes back to when we talk about instruction, and we've really had some really good trainings. I've been a part of some really good trainings at KVEC that's been provided for us through Anita Archer and through John O'Connor and some of those folks. But really, when it comes down to it, there's no magic bullets in instructing students with disabilities. There's no magic bullet in any type of instruction. What a lot of improvement hinges on is really scripted, explicit instruction where you get a lot of practice terms and you give a lot of feedback. And then, so as you see up here, do you have an opportunity for increased practice terms and feedback? If you're in a co-teaching situation, how much practice do your students get on the concepts that you're trying to teach? How many times can you let them practice extra? And how many times can you improve the type of instruction that you're doing by giving them plenty of instruction? And we use that mantra from Anita Archer. I do it, I model it for you, and then we do it together. And in special needs, we do it a lot in that together realm. And we give feedback. So those practice turns occur together. We scaffold, we give them plenty of support so that they can have success. We tie formative assessment to it, not so much grades. And we really give them an opportunity to improve at whatever rate they need to improve. Now, I would remind you to mute your mic if you could possibly. Thank you. And then I would say beyond that, retrieval of information from a blank slate. I'm just going to take you into this one if it will come up. I love this website, retrievalpractice.org. This is a free site. And what this basically means, retrieval of information from a blank slate, is where you give practice opportunities in very short bursts to have students pull information out of their brain and give it back to you either through reading, writing, or speaking to their partner, and giving them opportunities to do that at a lot of junctures in your lessons. So that they're getting practice on recall. If you look at their cognition, you're going to see that is one of the deficiencies that they have. So this is this is a retrieval guide, how to use retrieval practice to improve learning. And this is really talking about like what we did this morning, where I put you on the whiteboard and I said, can you remember the 5 components that are required if the box is not checked in present level? And then I had you put it up there. So you would come up with ways to do that. And you would share that with different, throughout the lesson. But this website really talks a lot about retrieval of information. So at any rate, I'm going to go back to the main screen. That's not the screen I wanted. Here's the screen. Okay. And then we would pair that retrieval of information with think, pair, share. And we would do that, through the use of retrieving information and then letting them write and think about it, pair them up with some partners, talk about it, share it out. Okay. And so certainly that would be one of my top ones if I was doing special design instruction right now as a teacher. And then I would consider
like 7 little bags of manipulatives that I just use in my classroom. There's a whole cabinet.
Someone is not muted. I think maybe Angela Holbrook
The gym
with Rogers Elementary.
And blocks and has little bags of all those kinds of manipulatives. That's probably where I got mine from.
Okay, so we can move on. So I was about to talk about flexible grouping for differentiated classrooms. So one of the things we practice flexible grouping. Do we understand that the research says that most groups of 6 to 8 are where most of the learning occurs, and we do that. We differentiate and we give activities around that flexible grouping that's going to impact those students in great ways. Another one would be to embed vocabulary instruction. Make sure that we're explicitly teaching vocabulary. Down here on the second page, I gave you some some of my favorites, Reading Rockets, 10 Ways to Teach Vocabulary with Online Tools. So there's a nice description of how to do this in an online setting. 11 Ways to Embed Vocabulary Instruction. And then another one would be around metacognition. Metacognition is just a big word that means for us to be able to think about what we just learned and then write about it or talk about it and kind of organize it in our mind as to what we just learned. So we have to teach students with disabilities that. We have to teach them how to do that, to be able to reflect on what they just learned. And that recapping and reflecting really builds that retrieval of information process. And so we want to think about that. And then we want to give them some strategies. Mnemonic strategies are a really good one. I use that a lot. Just creating words based on the first letter of the line, that type of thing. Those mnemonic strategies, there's some good articles in here about that. And then positive behavior. We're supposed to, by law, if we have students that have behavior issues, we're supposed to write a goal for that. And we are supposed to, if they're a student with a disability, we're supposed to come up with creative ways to include positive behavior intervention and to replace negative behavior with positive behavior. So there's a site there for that. And then 10 ways to scaffold learning, and then how to virtually scaffold learning is another good one. And then so as we move through that, let's go back and look just for a second. And I will try to get back to the main screen here and look at your chat and see what you had to say. I hope Stephanie Kilgore doesn't mind me sharing her list, but I'm going to do that. That was the first one that came up just by sheer chance. She said cooperative learning, think, pair, share, Socratic activities, multisensory, musical, sound types. So hitting those learning styles, very good. So you see how that really builds those visual, auditory, choral reading, using technology. Those are all good ways of teaching. But I just want you to think in those very succinct ways, knowing that's a great list, Stephanie, by the way. But I just want you to know that we know that there's going to be students that come to us each and every year with reading difficulties, each and every year with math difficulties, each and every year with written expression, communication, lack of ability to maintain attention. So if we can have preloaded strategies to be ready for those types of things, think about embedding explicit instruction, giving plenty of opportunity for repetition and feedback, retrieval of information, then we've hit special design instruction wide open. And we can say, if we're thinking about that, if we're teaching kids to think about their learning, if we're teaching them to write about their learning, to respond about their learning, giving them plenty of opportunities, showing them how to do it, doing it with them, and then turning them loose and letting them independently do it for a grade or do it for a project, then we've done what we're supposed to do. And this type of research-based strategies are effective and efficient in teaching students with disabilities. So great list there, Stephanie. We appreciate that. One-on-one, Crystal Gum says, computer, games, guided practice, modeling, explicit instruction, all good ones. Graphic organizers, that scaffolding comes into play right there. So we have lots of good ones. And if you guys just take a minute and look over what some of your colleagues and peers put in there. And if any of you haven't put your list in there, go ahead and put it in. So, but we're going to move on and we're going to talk about supplementary aids and services. Supplementary aids and services are what the student needs. Simply ask yourself the question, does the student need this? Strategies, aids, services, and other supports provided in the general education environment or other educational settings to gain access to the general curriculum as indicated by student performance data. So we're not denying access. Supplementary aids and services are what the student needs. Now, if you remember on the SDI, it's what the teacher does. Supplementary aids and services is what the student needs. Now, I'm going to take you real quick back to my sheet here, and I'm going to show you I've got a list of supplementary aids and services here. I've got a speech to text and a text to speech extension for Google Chrome here. That would be some access, some assistive technology access points. And so you would be able to use those. And then Also, the lesson plan and development handbook. This is a great resource for young people that are entering into the field. If you have 1 or 2 years of experience, this document right here is really well done. You can look here, they're talking about specially designed instruction right here, and you can see the things that are the top ones here: explicit instruction, scaffold instruction, use of mnemonics down here, ones that I love. And so there's a real good description, about 13 pages of reading right there. But then the way this thing is set up, I really love it. And it really, really helps to categorize what we're talking about. And it goes into depth here about explicit instruction, scaffold instruction. I'll try to get down here to where I can show you the examples of what I want to show you. There's direct instruction, tiered instruction, mnemonics. But down here around page 14 or 15, right, page 13, we start seeing a breakdown. Here's the SDI, and here are the things that we can do for this particular category. And here are some of the supplementary aids and services would work for that category. The category here is communication, being able to listen and comprehend. Here's some things for nonverbal, but then it even goes further than that. It goes beyond the language. It breaks down every category. There are some things for fluency in language. Pragmatics breaks that down for you. But then it gets down here in the academic realm, and we're talking about basic reading. And here's what some of the specially designed instruction strategies that we could use. And here are some of the supplementary aids and services that would go along with that. So remember, this is what the teacher does. This is what the student will access and use, and what the student would need to access and use the curriculum and make progress in the curriculum. So that's supplementary aids and services in a nutshell. But I wanted to show you that, and it goes right on: reading comprehension, then it'll get to math, it'll get to written language. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the standards as well. So getting back to what we were talking about here, supplementary aid services are needed for the student to advance, to be involved, make progress in the general curriculum, participate in extracurricular and non-academic activities, be educated and participate with other students. So it's just these resources we've tried to put together for you are right there at your fingertips. The guidance document being the centerpiece, and then these other extraneous versions of lots of resources that you can get to through the Google Classroom, or if you'll send me an email requesting us to help you with that, we can do that too. Here's some other examples of supplementary aids and services, and we've kind of already gone through that. Also keeping in mind reader and scribe and braille, some that can be listed there as well. Now, program modifications and support for school personnel. This is another category on your IEP. It's what's provided on behalf of the student to advance appropriate in the general curriculum and extracurricular participation. Program modifications supports for school personnel. Program modifications might be program modifications to the environment, to the actions around the student IEP, for adult support. You might modify the school time, or it might be training and consultation that the support personnel or the personnel in the school needs in order to see that the IEP is implemented correctly and the student would then advance appropriately in the curriculum and be able to participate. Again, this is things that support access and support implementation. Here's some other things: use of school time. We'd have shared planning time, use of school staff, additional adult supervision could be a possibility there. Any type of specialized training that would be needed is so that the folks would be equipped with the knowledge they need to implement the IEP. That's what we're talking about here. Supports for school personnel. Changing the program, modifying the program would be on this side. Supports for school personnel on this side. So you can see some of those examples there. What about teacher consultation? Is it needed? We can document it in this section. It occurs when a special education teacher or a related service provider meets on a regularly scheduled basis with a general ed teacher to simply make sure that the instructional needs, both academically and behaviorally, are being met for a student with an IEP. And it's provided to coordinate and plan supports to extend SDI into the general education setting. So you can have consultation, and you would document it not in the services page, but you would document it here under programs modifications support for school personnel. Program modifications supports for school personnel is student maintaining expected progress. That's a question you would ask. If yes, ARC needs to develop and implement a plan for fading supports and services, and the plan may include consultation. That's where consultation comes in. If consultation is needed, it's listed in program modifications supports for school personnel, not in special education services. So don't put consultation as a special ed service. Put it in the program modifications supports for school personnel section of your IEP. Then there's a section here on, and this is really not a transition training either. Progress monitoring, transition, we kind of do separately. Eligibility, we do separately to support the 11, 12, 13 reports that directors have to do each year. So post-secondary transition services are a coordinated set of activities that are updated annually. Transition planning is a process that is student-centered, student-driven, and embedded throughout the IEP process. And we always like to say that when a student is in the earlier years, we're really building skill. We're really building skill to support academic performance. But as we move into the high school years, the focus of the IEP becomes transition. And we're supposed to write a good post-secondary goal, and everything we do in that IEP then supports that post-secondary goal and successful transition into post-secondary life. So that really, really, really is important when we're talking about transition. The student is invited to teach to each ARC meeting where transition services are to be discussed. That is a necessary thing. We need to include the student in the process. And if we have not had them in the meeting, then we need to show how we're including them in the student-centered process. And these transition coordinated set of activities are a robust plan. We've got a guy that works with us at KVEC. His name is Will Cayeton. He plans and provides services around these robust activities for transition at the high school level. And if you're high school teachers, please try to book some time with him. Even during this virtual time, please try to book some time where he can have some Zoom sessions with your kids, where he can provide some of these activities to support your robust transition plans. So these coordinated transition activities are results-oriented. They focus on academic and functional achievement. They facilitate movement from school to post-secondary activities. They have to be age-appropriate. And when you do transition assessments to inform your present level, you do those transition assessments current. The information in the present levels to be current, so you need to be doing those transition assessments from year to year. We have a website we can show you here in just a second that helps you with those transition assessments. They have them right at your fingertips. They have them categorized for low incidence students, students that are matriculating with to a diploma, students that are not on or that are on a non-diploma track. So we have some resources for you that can really help you in planning these transition assessments. We also need to be thinking about their needs, their strengths, their preferences, and their interests, and capturing that in the present level, and then developing goals and activities and plans that are going to support that moving from before school to after school. So your post-secondary activities would come into play after they leave high school, and we need to make sure that we're including the student always. So here's some examples of transition assessments, and this is listed in your guidance document, but I'm going to show you a website with that on that, so I'm going to hurry through this. But basically what we're looking at is we're looking at how the student is going to do after school. Are we getting them ready? Do we have activities in their plan? And this is required at age 16. You start with a multi-year course of study and an individual or an ILP at the age of 14, and then at age 16, the goal is required, the post-secondary goal is required. The annual goals are linked to it by check boxes to support that post-secondary goal. And we really need to think about that as the centerpiece of the IEP for students that are 14 and above. And we even tell our folks, start planning at 13 or earlier if necessary. It's in the law that you can do that earlier, but we really want to make sure that we catch what's required at 14 by starting to plan at age 13, and catch what's required at 16 by starting to plan at age 15. So because you never know when that student's going to turn 16, and we've got to be prepared for that. We never know when that student's going to turn 14. We do know when they're in the 8th grade. So the law says by the 14th birthday or by the 8th grade year, we're to have an ILP and a multi-year course of study embedded in the IEP. So that's what that slide right there says. And the ILP is also put together, and it aligns with the multi-year course of study. Notice it's not a 4-year course of study, it's a multi-year course of study. So you would have to include those 7th and 8th graders and what their course of study is, and then you would plan that all the way from the current year through the year of exit. So you see that that's what that says. The multi-year course of study is needed to assist the student reach post-secondary goals, and it's developed to indicate courses to be taken from the current year to the student's expected year of exit. Transition services needs, age 14, grade 8, multi-year course of study, aligned with IOP, indicate the courses needed to be taken, and what is needed to assist the student in reaching post-secondary goals, and then document all that discussion in the conference summary. Now, there's a place on the record review document if you don't document it in the conference summary, if you don't talk about the fact that you've discussed with the student the multi-year course of study, that they're taking courses that are going to lead to what's identified in the IOP as their interests, their preferences, and what they might end up in a vocation, where they may end up going to school or whatever, and making sure that that course of study is designed to aid them to post-secondary goals, to reach those. Let's go back. Transition services include strategies and activities documented in the present levels. By age 16, you got to have that. And then you got instruction, post-secondary adult living objectives, acquisition of daily living skills. These are all examples, related services, community experiences, development of employment. These are all things that you might check, and then you would provide robust activities around those check boxes, and you would see that those activities plan to help students either through instruction or related services, community experiences, any of these that would support their transition to post-secondary life. Areas that must be addressed in writing post-secondary goal, you have to have an education training piece, you have to have an employment piece. And when applicable, or if appropriate, you would do an independent living. And I would urge you to think about those students that have daily living, they have low adaptive scores, to think about whether or not they really need it, and discuss in your conference summary the reason for not having that if you don't have it. Why it's okay not to have an independent living goal as opposed. But you definitely, these two are required. And so here is a little graphic organizer by the student's 16th birthday. The IEP includes appropriate, measurable post-secondary goals. Here's a template for post-secondary goal for education, training, and employment. After graduation, insert the student's name, excuse me, and then put in the education training piece. The student is going to enroll at Hazard Community College and take courses that lead to certification in being a CNA, a nursing assistant. And they're going to get a job as a nursing assistant. So you need to be real succinct and real specific. You need to name the job they're going to get. You need to name where they're going to get the training and education and what it's going to lead to, and put their name in there, and then you got it. You don't have to put a lot of other stuff. You don't need to either or this. You don't need to say they're going to go UK or they're going to go to Murray State and they're going to get a job in snake handling or motorcycle repair. No, you put the name, you put the training that they're going to get in one job. And that's really basically how you do that. So don't make it any more difficult than it is, and make sure you got all the pieces. The education and training piece, the employment piece. And I see lots of times that people, when I review folders, that they miss that. Get the name. Always has to have after graduation or after high school. This is a goal that's going to occur after they leave us. Name, education training piece, employment piece. And then if appropriate, you would do an independent living goal. And you would put after high school, after high school, the student goal is to do something independent living, where they would participate where and how. If it's participating in dressing themselves at their home, that is a goal after high school, and that's independent living. Or if it's, preparing, being involved in supported employment, that kind of thing. So independent living, just think about what that is and what that looks like, and if it's appropriate for them to have that goal, then include it. If not, you can leave it out. Here are the services. Notice multi-year course of study is listed here. This comes right out. This is a screenshot right off the IEP. You must have multi-year course of study outlined in IEP as one of your transition services in your robust plan. Now, you can have all this other stuff, and these things can be particular to that child, and they can be unique to that one particular individual, but you must have multi-year course of study here in your transition services and who's responsible for providing that. Don't leave that out, because that is a no-no, and that is a no on your record review. And in order to get to be a good folder, you've got to have 100% of yeses on your indicator. It used to be 49A through I, but with the new indicator, the numbers have changed a little bit, and I'll have to study up and figure out what those numbers are. But in the old record review, it's 49A through I, and one of those, in order to get a yes, you must put multi-year course of study in the ILP, or as outlined in the ILP. You must put it in the transition services box. Excuse me. Now, another piece on getting the transition correct is education and training must be checked, and employment must be checked. And if you're going to do independent living, this is the way this is your annual goal being tied to support of the post-secondary goal. So those check boxes have to be checked. That's what it looks like right there. There's your measurable annual goal. Must relate to your post-secondary goal. If an outside agency is going to help you pay for some of these activities, then you must obtain signed consent from the parent or emancipated youth prior to inviting the outside agency. That's 1 day before the conference summary is generated. You need to have a signature on that consent form dated the day before you sent that out, before you generated that notice to send out to invite those people. Otherwise, you're violating confidentiality. So right here, I just wanted to show you real quick another of South Bend's wonderful resources. You see the list of downloadable transition assessments that will inform your present levels for transition, and right there they are. Here is education, and here are, and if you click on it, it'll bring that assessment up for you. Here's a kid on a high school certificate track. Here's one on a diploma track. Here's life skills, and they've got it broken down all the way through like that. So if we go on down and we're looking at independent living, we got the middle school, the high school, and you see what's there. So this is a really good resource for you if you're working at the high school level and you need transition assessments. You say, well, how do I get these transition assessments? You pull them up right here from this website. Here's another one, transition activities. It's going to do that to me again, but I'm going to switch on them. And there's about a 13-page document here that I have posted in our beautiful class. And it has those transition activities on it. Transition service examples right here. And I'll show you what it looks like really quickly. And as you can see, got to open it with Google Docs because it is a Google Doc. Hopefully it'll open. And here's just a really good resource that kind of tells you what should go in those transition activities and what kind of services you can provide all the way through that. And like I said, it's about an 11-page document, so it's got a lot of information for you. Okay, as we continue to move through, we said we'd talk about ESY. It's determined on an individual basis. That's extended school year. It's specially designed instruction and related services provided to a child with a disability beyond the normal school year based on student's IEP at no cost to the parents, and it's designed to maintain the student's present level. So it's a maintenance thing. It's not what we consider compensatory ed, but it's something that the data would say the student cannot recoup the information lost over a long break within the 6 weeks that the recoupment rules give you, and then you would need to provide ESY. Not limited to a particular category of disability. It's not legal to say, oh, we're just doing ESY for all of our low incidence kids. So it's very, very important that you understand that.
Yes, and I need to add to that as well, Denny, Paul.
Okay.
Remember the ESY, when you're actually teaching ESY, you're only teaching those skills that the child did not recoup that information.
Thank you. That's great information right there, Brenda. So ESY, one of the problems we have with saying you're doing ESY correct is if you don't have progress monitoring data that we can look at when we're reviewing your files, it's going to be hard for us to say that you're doing ESY correctly. Another thing that I can mention to you too that I mark you off on quite often is out of this Andrew case, one of the clear things that we need to be doing is including the parent and their concerns in the development of the IEP. So we ask open-ended questions around the development of the IEP. So we ask this, what do you think your student needs to be working on? And we capture that in our conference summary, and we capture that on the IEP, and we include that information that parents give us. Because sometimes they know their student better than we do, especially when they're younger. So we really need to be mindful of that as we move through. So I'm not going to go deep into the ESY. I know that with accommodations, assessment accommodations, we need to be thinking about assessment accommodations. Is there a current IEP? Is there consistent delivery? Are there lesson plan connections? Is there assessment information that backs the need for that accommodation? So in other words, if you had a kid that's LD in reading, but are not LD in math, are you giving a calculator to that student just because they're in special ed? So you got to think about those things. You got to make sure that they're having a current IEP, they're getting consistent delivery of that particular accommodation that's being discussed, and that it's individualized, and that we're fading that accommodation over time, and we're trying to develop independence by fading that accommodation as we move through. As the student has been in special ed for a while, we need to have a plan in place to fade that accommodation over time. Assessment accommodations used consistently as part of the student's routine instruction. That has to be happening consistently as part of the student's routine instruction. Now, that's not to say you have to do it every day. We used to say daily, but consistently a part of the student's routine instruction. So if you're getting special design instruction 3 days a week for 50 minutes, we're teaching the student how to use that accommodation, and we're allowing them to use that accommodation to access. And then we're allowing them to use that accommodation on the testing to show us what they know. Age of majority, at least 1 year prior to the students reaching the age of majority, the IEP includes a statement that the student and parent have been informed of the student's rights, and the rights will transfer to the student. So we need to make sure we're doing that unless the student is has severe disabilities and the parent is going to not allow emancipation, and they have to do, there's court proceedings, legal proceedings. So if you have that happen in your classroom or on your caseload, you might want to call your director or get in contact with us and let us help you with that process. We talked about progress report to parents. We know that we have to do that as often as we do it for every other student in the school. Now, we've reached the end, and I still have 4 minutes to spare. Do we have questions? We have people hanging on. Still got some people out there in virtual land. Appreciate you being here. Can't tell you how much. If you want to put questions in the chat, we'll try to answer all those questions. We'll save the chat. And it's been a good day. We've tried to cover a lot of information. We've tried to give you a lot of resources. We have the Google Classroom up and running. We've shared some things with you. Maybe you had difficulty in accessing some of that, and it might have to do with the fact that I have 2 Google Classrooms or I have 2 Google accounts. So we'll get all that straightened out, and we're here to support you. I want to say to you, it's so important that we paint a picture that we can do this through this virtual time, that we paint a picture that we got the resources, we got the know-how, we got the smarts, we got good teachers, we got quality people working with students with disabilities, and we can do the special design instruction, we can do the progress monitoring, even if it is in a virtual setting. And so we really encourage you, when you tell your story in your community, please tell the story that we can do this, and we are doing this, we've got this, that we're not sitting back on our duff just making excuses for why we're not teaching because of COVID, and that we have good, solid resources, we have good know-how, and we got good, bright people out there doing the work. And if you have needs, please reach out to us. If you have resource needs, if you need to talk, if you need a technical question answered, if we can't answer it, we'll find the answer. We'll go up the chain of command and we'll find the answer. Brenda and Dion are doing a fabulous job at KVEC, as well as Jeff. And so we're providing our region with the best, utmost virtual training and instruction and resources that we can possibly do during this time. We've hardly taken a breath since March the 6th or March the 13th or whenever it was that we went into this virtual setting. So, and we know that you guys are doing big jobs out there, and we're here to support you. So let's go one more slide and we'll get a kick out of this one. Please contact me with questions. I didn't have everybody's avatar that had a hand in this. I want to give due where credit is due. Brenda, Dion, all the folks at KVEC, Chastity, Cheryl, Doug, Vonda, Steph, all the folks that work together there and special education staff really had their hands all over this. Been working on it for quite a bit of the summer. It's a large undertaking, and please put in the chat, if you're still hanging on with us, please put in the chat some plus deltas for us. If you saw some things that were good, let us know. If there's some deltas for you, we're looking to improve. We don't think we got it all figured out, but we think we've got capable people that will work hard to try to figure it out, and we'll certainly come back stronger and better for it. So you're not going to hurt our feelings. If you have some negative things to write in there, or some constructive things, I should say, to write in there for me, I'm a big boy and I can handle it. I coached basketball in this region for about 28 years. So I've been called a lot of things, and some of them are not so nice. And so I appreciate you all hanging in here on a Monday with schools opening back up, people reporting back for the first few days, people reporting back to plan what they're going to do for students with disabilities. We're going to continue to work on that Google Classroom and make it a SharePoint for us. Hopefully it can be a two-way street where you can share things with us. We're going to allow you to just have an open SharePoint there, and we're really going to work on that thing and try to make it as good as we possibly can. Thank you all so much.